The worst World War II stories. 16 Days to Die. Opening scene December 8th, 1941. Pearl Harbor, 300 hours. Bang. Pause. Bang. The sound echoes through the oily darkness. It's coming from below, from the steel coffin resting 40 feet beneath the surface of the harbor. Marine bugler 𝗸𝗃𝗧𝗃𝗃 stands guard on Ford Island. He hears it again. Metal on metal. Deliberate, methodical. A pattern that makes his blood run cold. He knows what it means. Someone is still alive down there. Someone is banging to get out. This is the story of how 3 young men fought death for 16 days, in the worst way imaginable, and how the world forgot them for 70 years. The last photograph of Clifford Olds was taken on December 6th, 1941. He's standing in the Monkey Bar in Honolulu, a dark, smoky watering hole where sailors on liberty drank away the boredom of peacetime service. Olds is 20 years old, from Stanton, North Dakota, a small-town kid who joined the Navy to see the world. In the photo, he's smiling, raising a glass. A 𝗕𝗆ci cigarette dangles from his fingers. 2 friends flank him. Jack Miller on his left, Frank Kosa in the middle. 3 sailors. 3 brothers in arms. 3 young men who believed they had their whole lives ahead of them. 24 hours later, 2 of them would be dead. The 3rd would spend the next 16 days dying. December 7th, 1941. The day everything changed at 0755 hours. The first wave of Japanese aircraft screamed over Pearl Harbor. The USS West Virginia, affectionately known as the 𝗬𝗃𝗃𝗃, was moored outboard of the USS Tennessee on Battleship Row. She was exposed. Vulnerable. A 600-foot target painted against the morning sky. The torpedoes came fast. 6 of them slammed into her port side. Maybe 7. The exact number was never confirmed. 2 bombs followed from overhead. One penetrated deep into the ship's interior. Another exploded near the command tower. Captain Mervyn Bennion was killed almost instantly. Shrapnel tore through his abdomen. He died giving orders, trying to save his ship, trying to save his men, but some men couldn't be saved. Deep in the forward section of the ship, in a pump room designated a 111, 3 sailors found themselves trapped. The compartment was sealed. The hatches jammed. Water flooded the corridors outside. Oil mixed with seawater. The ship listed, then settled. 40 feet down, on the bottom of Pearl Harbor, Ronald Endicott was 18. From Aberdeen, Washington, Louis Buddy Colston was 21. From Henryville, Indiana, Clifford Olds was 20. From North Dakota, they were alone. In the dark, surrounded by water. And they had no idea if anyone could hear them, the sound that haunted the living. By nightfall, on December 7th, the survivors knew. Someone was banging from inside the West Virginia. It was worse at night. 𝗸𝗃𝗧𝗃𝗃 remembered decades later. You'd hear bang, 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 then stop, then bang, bang, bang from deep in the bow of the ship. It didn't take long to realize that men were making that noise. The sound was methodical, rhythmic. The 𝗏𝗏𝗏 Marines and sailors stationed near the wreck dreaded guard duty. They would trade posts, do anything to avoid being within earshot of that terrible noise. Because they knew the truth. There was nothing they could do. The 𝗬𝗃𝗃𝗃 had settled on an even keel ironically. The work of a quick-thinking fire control officer who counter-flooded compartments to prevent the ship from capsizing like the USS Oklahoma. That decision saved hundreds of lives, but it doomed 3. If the ship had capsized, rescuers could have cut through the exposed hull. But with the West Virginia sitting upright on the harbor floor, completely surrounded by water, any attempt to breach the hull would cause a catastrophic blowout. The pressure differential would flood whatever air pockets remained. Cutting them out meant killing them instantly. So they listened. And they waited. And they prayed the trapped men wouldn't suffer long. But the banging continued. Day after day, night after night. Inside the tomb, imagine it. You're in complete darkness. The only light comes from the flashlights you managed to grab before the compartment sealed. You ration the batteries. You know they won't last forever. The compartment is dry. That's the miracle and the curse. An air pocket formed when the ship settled. You have oxygen. Not much, but enough. For now, you find emergency rations, canned food, water. A manhole cover leads to the fresh water supply. You open it. You can survive on this. 4 days, maybe weeks. You have something else too. A calendar. 12 inches by 14 inches, and a red pencil. You make a decision. You'll mark each day. You'll keep track. Because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand how long you fought. December 7th. You mark the first X. You bang on the hull. You take turns. You use wrenches, metal tools, anything that makes noise. You bang in patterns, Morse code. SOS. Help. Please. You wonder if anyone can hear you. You wonder if anyone is trying. The impossible choice. Above, the Navy brass faced a terrible calculation. The harbor was chaos. Ships were burning. Bodies floated in the water. Oil fires raged. Over 2,400 Americans were dead or dying. The Pacific Fleet was crippled. The nation was at war. And somewhere below, 3 men were banging on the hull of a sunken battleship. The decision was made quickly. Too quickly for some. The 3 men didn't amount to a hill of beans in the grand scheme of things. Resources were needed elsewhere. The living took priority over the trapped. It was cold. It was logical. It was necessary. It was unbearable. Jack Miller, Old's friend from boot camp, stood on the dock near the wreck. He prayed. He was a North Dakota kid too. He and Cliff had talked about fishing. Motorcycles. The girls back home, they'd been drinking together the night before the attack. Miller knew Olds was down there, probably in the pump room. Probably still alive, and there was nothing he could do but listen to him die. The calendar, the banging stopped on Christmas Eve. For 2 weeks, it had been a constant presence. A reminder, a haunting. Then, silence. The survivors felt relief and guilt in equal measure. Relief that the terrible sound had finally ended. Guilt that they had felt relief. 6 months later, salvage crews began the grim work of raising the West Virginia. They pumped out 800,000 gallons of fuel oil. They removed ammunition. They sealed holes. They worked through compartment after compartment, recovering bodies. 60 X-men were found trapped inside. Commander 𝗶𝘆𝗺𝗧𝗏 led the recovery effort. He'd seen it all by then. Bodies in every state of decomposition. Men who'd drowned instantly. Men who'd burned. Men who'd been crushed. But when he opened compartment 111, he found something different. The compartment was dry. Flashlight batteries littered the floor. Empty ration cans lay scattered about. The manhole cover to the fresh water supply stood open, and on the wall, a calendar. 12 inches by 14 inches, 16 red X marks. December 7th through December 23rd. Hardened salvage workers wept. They'd found 3 bodies. Still in their uniforms, still together. Ronald Endicott. Louis Costin, Clifford Olds. They'd survived longer than anyone on the West Virginia, longer than anyone at Pearl Harbor. They'd survived 16 days in an airtight tomb, marking each day, rationing supplies, banging on the hull, hoping someone would come. No one came. The silence that followed, the Navy sent telegrams to the families. Your son died at his duty station. December 7th, 1941. That was all they were told. Nothing about the pump room. Nothing about the calendar. Nothing about the 16 days of suffering. It was considered a kindness. Arlan Kostinbadi's younger brother discovered the truth first. He joined the Navy in October 1942 at age 17. He was assigned to the USS Tuscaloosa. In the South Pacific, far from Aum, a shipmate who'd worked the salvage crew told him the story. Harlan never told his parents, The knowledge would have destroyed them. 𝗸𝘃𝗺𝗧 learned the truth from a cousin stationed at Bremerton, where the West Virginia was being repaired. He told his siblings, not their parents. His mother, Jane, died in 1956. His father, Nathan, died in 1971. They never knew. The calendar itself was sent to the Chief of Naval Personnel in Washington, D.C. It was lost, disappeared into the bureaucratic void. For 32 years, archivists searched for it. They never found it. An 8-day clock recovered from the pump room, 𝗬𝗃 timepiece that had stopped ticking in that sealed compartment, was donated to the West Virginia Museum in Parkersburg. It remains there today, a silent witness to 16 days of hell. Britain's forgotten catastrophe while Americans mourned Pearl Harbor, another disaster unfolded across the Atlantic, one that would claim even more lives in even less time. June 17, 1940, Saint-Nazaire, France. The RMS 𝗨𝗨ici𝗹𝗺𝗀𝗏, passenger liner, requisitioned as a troop ship, sat anchored 5 miles off the French coast. German forces were advancing. France was collapsing. Operation Arialda. Evacuation of British troops and civilians was in full swing. The Lancastria's normal capacity was 2,180 passengers and crew. That morning, Royal Navy officers asked Captain Rudolph Sharp how many people he could take. He said 3,000. At a pinch, they loaded over 9,000 soldiers, RAF personnel, civilian refugees, women, children, crammed into every available space, the decks overflowing, the holds packed, a floating mass of humanity desperate to escape. At 1:50 p.m., German bombers appeared. 4 bombs struck the ship. One penetrated the forward hold. It exploded deep in the ship's belly, among the thousands of soldiers packed below. Another ruptured the fuel tanks. Oil poured into the water. The Lancastria began to list. She sank in 20 minutes. Bodies filled the water. The oil caught fire. Men burned as they swam. Others drowned, pulled under by the suction of the sinking ship. Lifeboats were swamped. Rescuers couldn't get close because of the flames. Between 4,000 and 7,000 people died. The exact number will never be known. There was no complete passenger manifest. The ship was so overloaded, so chaotic, that no one knew exactly who was aboard. It remains the worst maritime disaster in British history. Worse than the Titanic. Worse than the Lusitania. More deaths than both combined, and Winston Churchill ordered it covered up. The de notice on the evening of June 17, 1940, as survivors were being pulled from the burning water off Saint-Nazaire, Churchill issued a defense notice. De notice to all British media. No coverage of the Lancastria. No death counts. No survivor interviews. Nothing. The newspapers have got quite enough disaster for today at least, he told his staff. Britain was reeling. Dunkirk had been a miracle. But France was lost. The Battle of Britain was about to begin. The nation's morale hung by a thread. Churchill decided the British people couldn't handle the truth about the land. The de notice was supposed to last a few days. Churchill later wrote he'd intended to lift it once the initial shock passed, but events moved too quickly. France surrendered on June 22nd. The Blitz began in September. Churchill, by his own admission, forgot to lift the ban. The de notice lasted 100 years, until 2040. Some details leaked out. The New York Times ran the story a week later. A few British papers published death notices, but the full scope of the disaster remained hidden for decades. Survivors were instructed not to speak about it, not even to their families. Those who tried to tell the story were silenced. The sinking didn't fit the narrative of British resilience and triumph. It was messy. It was tragic. It was a failure, so it was buried. The wreck of the 𝗨𝗵 lies on the seabed 5 miles south of St-Denis. It's a war grave now. Diving is prohibited. A 200-meter exclusion zone surrounds it. Between 3,000 and 7,000 souls rest inside. Forgotten by history, covered up by bureaucracy. Honored only by the families who refused to let them disappear. The men who came back, the USS West Virginia didn't stay at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. She was raised, repaired, rebuilt. By April 1944, she returned to service. The 𝗬𝗃 became a symbol of American determination. She fought at Surigao Strait, where she helped annihilate a Japanese fleet. She supported landings at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. She shot down 8 kamikaze planes. On August 31st, 1945, the West Virginia steamed into Tokyo Bay for the Japanese surrender. 5 musicians from her crew were transferred to the USS Missouri to play at the ceremony. They stood on the deck as General MacArthur accepted Japan's surrender. They played the national anthem as the war ended. It was poetic. Full circle. The ship that had been sunk at Pearl Harbor was present at the final victory, but everyone aboard knew the truth. Deep in her rebuilt hull, in 𝗕𝗏𝗡 111, 3 men had died over 16 days. Their sacrifice was part of the ship's bones now. Part of her story, part of the reason she fought so hard. The 𝗬𝗃 was decommissioned in 1947. She'd earned 5 battle stars. She'd avenged herself. She'd come home. But Ronald Endicott, Louis Costin, and Clifford Olds never did. The weight of silence war creates impossible choices. Do you save the many or the few? Do you protect morale or honor the truth? Do you remember the triumphs or the tragedies? The men of the West Virginia made an impossible choice. They chose the living. They couldn't save their trapped. Trying would have killed them faster. So they listened to the banging and did nothing. It haunted them for the rest of their lives. Dick Fisk, the Marine bugler, choked up every time he told the story. Even 70 years later. Even after all he'd seen in the war, the sound of that desperate banging never left him. Jack Miller, Ode's friend, volunteered for the USS Lexington 2 weeks after Pearl Harbor. He spent the war hunting the Japanese fleet. He survived. Frank Kosa, the 3rd man in the photograph from the monkey bar, died in February 1944 aboard the USS 𝗸𝗶𝗏 in the Pacific. Miller visited Pearl Harbor often after the war. He would stand on the dock where the West Virginia once sat. He'd pray for Cliff. He'd think about that last night drinking beer together. He'd wonder if his friend knew someone was listening. If it brought him any comfort, he never got an answer. 𝗓𝗏𝗏. Ronald Endicott and Louis Costin are buried at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, the Punch Bowl, in Honolulu. Their headstones list their date of death as December 7th, 1941, not December 23rd. The official record doesn't acknowledge they survived 16 days. The Navy told the families they died at their duty stations during the attack. Technically true, functionally a lie. Clifford Olds' remains were sent home to Stanton, North Dakota. He's buried there. His headstone also reads December 7th, 1941. His parents never knew the truth. His brothers and sisters kept the secret to the grave. The forgotten lessons, the worst stories of World War II aren't always about the battles. They're about the spaces in between. The silences, the men who died slowly while help was impossible. The disasters erased from history because they didn't fit the narrative. 3 young men trapped in the hull of a battleship, marking days on a calendar, banging on the walls, hoping someone would hear them. 9,000 people crammed onto a sinking ship, drowning in burning oil while their government buried the story for a century. These aren't stories of heroism. They're stories of horror, of humanity's capacity for both sacrifice and silence, of the price we pay when we choose morale over memory. Dick Fisk said it best. Decades after Pearl Harbor, his voice still breaking. I can't believe somebody is still in their butt. They were. For 16 days, they were, and the world forgot them. Epilogue. The calendar that disappeared somewhere in the archives of the U.S. Navy, or perhaps lost forever in some forgotten filing cabinet in Washington, D.C. There is a calendar. 12 inches by 14 inches. 16 red X marks December 7th through December 23rd, 1941. It's the only physical evidence of what Ronald Endicott, Louis Costin, and Clifford Olds endured. The only proof they didn't die instantly. That they fought. That they hoped. That they counted every excruciating day. Archivists have searched for it for more than 30 years. It's never been found. Maybe it was destroyed. Maybe it's mislabeled in some dusty warehouse. Maybe someone decided it was too painful to keep. Or maybe it's still there, waiting. A red-penciled testament to suffering that no one wanted to remember. The calendar is gone, but the story remains, because some horrors are too profound to forget, even when governments try to erase them, even when families choose silence over pain, even when the official record lies. 3 men banged on the hull of the USS West Virginia for 16 days. The world heard them and did nothing. That's the worst story of World War II. Not that they died, but that they died knowing help was impossibly close and impossibly far away.